What's up, friends? It's Haley, aka Bird,
and Randy,
and you're tuning in to the Give 'em the Bird podcast.
This podcast is all about challenging what it means to be healthy and fit. It's about celebrating sustainable behavior change and non-scale victories.
And most importantly, it's about giving the bird to the diet industry and societal expectations of body size. Why? Well, because at the end of the day, you have an entire life to live that does not require your body look a certain way.
Thanks for tuning in.
Now, let's give 'em the bird. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Give 'em the Bird podcast. It's Haley and Randy, just us today. And we just kind of wanted to do like a little check-in episode because, as you know, we've been spotty about attendance here on the podcast, thanks to moi. And I think that we're ready to get more regular with it. So just wanted to do a quick little check-in because, I mean, Randy, we like chat fairly regularly, but I know we were just saying when we met for lunch, there were like some things that had come up for both of us in our lives around like body and food and stuff. And so we just wanted to talk through those today and kind of share with you all how we're feeling in the hopes that the way that we work through things and talk about it can help you all out. So first off, hi Randy, how are you?
Hi, so good, so good. Love to see your face as always.
I meant to tell you this off mic, but I had like 3 people text me about last week's episode on functional sobriety, and they were like, while I'm listening to it, Randy's voice is so soothing.
Like, I know. Oh my God, I always think that about your voice.
I know. You always say that to me, but yeah. You've got that podcast voice now. It is on. It is, you got it.
I love it.
Yeah. So what's new? How you feeling lately?
So lately, I found myself thinking that I want to lose weight again. And initially, I always get like so mad at myself for feeling that because, hello, I am a co-host of Give 'em the Bird podcast, and we are not about that. But I think that just goes to show that those thoughts are going to come back. And it's not necessarily about not having those thoughts at all, but how you respond to them. And so, you know, I even went so far as to think like maybe I should re-download my FitnessPal and just track. I know, it's so cringy. But I was like, maybe I just track what I'm eating and then just gauge where I'm at and not restrict anything. But I was like, no, I feel like that's just a slippery slope. And probably what I really need, and you kind of helped me verbalize this or kind of narrow in on what I really need when we had lunch together, and that was more just being intentional about what I'm eating because, you know, we've talked about this, but for the longest time I was my FitnessPal and weighing foods and things like that, and I swung so far in the other direction of just not dieting, and that served me really well for a while because I no longer looked at the nutrition labels and really worried about my food at all. But then I got to the point where the things I was eating and the way I was eating just wasn't fueling my body and wasn't making me feel the best, I don't think. And so, you know, I think what I really need at this point is just to be more intentional and really kind of get on the intuitive eating train and like, am I hungry? Am I full? Will this, you know, serve me in what I have going the rest of the day? And fueling my body appropriately and all of that. And then also just getting into a regular exercise routine or movement routine. I have been more regular lately, but still not, you know, what I would like to see in terms of, you know, I know it makes me feel really, really good when I move intentionally. And I know physically, but also for my mental health, I just feel great when I've done that. And so I think a combination of just being intentional about those things is really what I'm craving. It's not the weight loss. It's just feeling better about what I'm doing for my body, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, I don't know if you told me about the MyFitnessPal, but
I think I was embarrassed. I think I was like, oh my God.
well, no need to be. You want to know why? Because I
know.
started tracking food in my Fitbit
Did you?
account. Yeah, like, and it was the same thing. It's like, I'm not going to do this to restrict my calories. I just like want to know how much I'm eating, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And then I was reminded of how freaking tedious it is, and that
Yes.
turned me off. I was like, I don't got time for this anymore. Like,
Yep.
thank God they don't have a shortcut for that shit. But yeah, isn't it funny how we totally fall back on that? I don't know what
Mm-hmm.
it is. It's just like a safety. It's like the first thing I think to do when I'm not feeling so hot about the bod
Yep.
is track my fucking food.
Yep. Well, and I think
Right.
you've said this before too, but it's something we can control. And
Yeah.
if we feel out of control in any way, like, well, I can track this and I can manipulate it and then I will have control. And I think that's probably it more than anything else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
I think you are so right. And I also love what you were saying at the end of, because I remember when we were eating lunch, it was like, would I feel this way about my body if it looked the same, but I was being more intentional about food and movement? Like I could look the exact same, but if I was in a more regular movement pattern, if for me, one thing I just mentioned to you is that I've been totally over consuming sugar and sweets, and I'll get into that in a second. Um, but like, would I still feel this way about my body, even if it looked the same? And we both were like, no. Like, I
exactly.
think I would feel a heck of a lot better. It's just because I'm not doing those like regular healthy habits for me that make me feel good mentally and physically. And yeah, I remember that's kind of like what we got to. And that's why I love that one question of like, if you knew that your body, usually I use it in regards to like if somebody is restricting food or like over exercising or doing exercise they don't enjoy, but that question of if you knew that no matter what you did or what you ate, how you moved, your body would never change, would you still move and eat in the same way that you're doing? It's almost
Hmm.
like we flip it, right? Like if you if your body looked the exact same as it does right now, but you were engaging in regular movement and listening to your hunger and fullness cues, would you still feel shitty about your body? You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
almost like flipping that statement. And I think that that's really helpful for me to think about. So,
Yeah, that's a good reminder. I've kind of forgotten about that question. We talked a lot about that when I did your coaching, and
hmm
that was so helpful at the time. And I think I kind of forgot about that. So that's a good reminder for
I
sure.
mean, I forget about it and I ask the
Yeah.
question all the time. Like
Yeah.
I,
Well, I think that's a good reminder that like, we dedicate so much of our time to this podcast and you with your job, like to think about these things, but still we find ourselves falling into those same patterns, and it just shows how influential, society is and
yeah.
all of that on our thought processes.
Yeah, and it's funny that you say that because so this whole sugar shit that I've been dealing with, like, so sugar shit.
Sugar shit, love it.
Uh, I have just been overeating sugar so much. Like, I was overdoing it, and I truly overdoing it, not just having like four or five, like eating
Hmm.
an entire thing of Oreos.
Hmm.
And there was a lot of some old habits that I noticed coming up with it where it was like I would try to hide it from Tyler or
Hmm.
just like the guilt and the shame and a lot of those things. And I did bring it up to my therapist. And so I was like, okay, this is a red flag. And so I told myself, like, obviously, what do I need to do? Like, self coaching moment. What would I do if I was one of my clients? And it would be working through like that systematic habituation or the make peace with food practice, right? Where it's like
Hmm.
we go out, we purchase the food, we keep it available, and we see if that desire to eat it all the time diminishes, right?
Hmm.
And so I did that, and I actually recorded the process like in clips. I was gonna make a reel out of it, and then I was like,
Ooh.
"This is like 10 minutes long." I was like, this needs to be a freaking YouTube video at this point. Like,
I would watch it.
oh my god. Um, and for like it really did make me feel a lot better for a while with Oreos. Like having Oreos in the house and not feeling like I had to either eat them all or hide them in the back of the cabinet. And so that was helpful. but it's still very, very prevalent and present in fact, just yesterday, actually, I purchased, 4 Cookies and Dreams cookies.
Oh, yeah.
Oh
Those are the
God,
best.
they're freaking amazing. Yeah, Randy, they're so good.
So good.
And ate 2 of them just like standing in the kitchen yesterday, and it's like that I didn't even get to enjoy them across like an extended time period. Like,
Sure. Yeah.
you know, um, so that's something that I have been struggling with, along with some of the body stuff, that
Hmm.
you mentioned too. Just changes in my body postpartum, and I'm
Yep.
reminded, like, it's been a while since I've seen big changes in my body. I mean, obviously I got pregnant and there were changes there, but that was a lot easier to excuse almost. And I say
Sure.
excuse, in like quotations. Um, but yeah, I'm feeling a lot of that, like, wow, my body has really changed. Like, I thought it would bounce back quicker, or whatever it
Hmm.
might be. And I think, I don't know if this is how you feel currently, but in the past, I feel like you've kind of shared with me that sometimes when you have those realizations, it's like, am I actually doing the right thing? Like, should I be going about my health and my fitness and my nutrition in this way? Or is
Hmm.
this just an excuse kind of
Yes.
thing,
Yep.
to like not exercise regularly and eat all the Oreos and cookies and dreams? Like, I don't know. Do you still notice that popping up for you or anything like that?
I haven't as much recently, but I absolutely did at the beginning. I'm like, exactly what you said. Is this just an excuse so that I don't have to follow these rules that I followed for so long? So, but it's hard because I have felt this summer much less excited to like go on the boat, for example, with my family because I don't like how I look in a swimsuit. Compared to the last couple years, I had really no problems with how my body looked. And that makes me sad because, those are good memories to be made. And I try to ignore it when I'm out there and try to be present in the moment. But, when everyone else is on display and I'm like doing the full comparison thing, it's hard. So, and switching gears, I was just curious when you were talking about like the sugar thing for you. Do you think it's at all related to like pumping, nursing, that kind of thing? And just like, because you need more calories and things. I'm wondering if you think that's related or if it's just, one of those time periods for you where you've, you know,
Yeah.
gone into a
Yeah.
different stage.
I do definitely think that some of it is, it's like not necessarily, I guess, like kind of not that I need more calories, but that my eating is so much less structured, so much less. Can you say that, so much less?
I've definitely said that before.
Yeah, we're keeping that in there. That's
Yeah,
not
that
editing.
works.
That's not getting out. Yeah. It is not, there we go, not as structured. Way
Mm-hmm.
less structured than in
Yeah,
the past as it has been. Like, I don't have, when I'm at home, like on the weekends, it's like I mean, we still do like breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but it just all depends on Mallory, like a lot of it
sure.
does. And working on a schedule, people, working on it, but it's hard. Um,
Yeah.
and so I think a lot of it was that, that sense of deprivation, almost like I'm over hungry. I'm over
Mm-hmm.
hungry and my body needs like quick sugar, quick carbs. And I would find myself, instead of like sitting down or making something that's more, substantial, even if it was like a yogurt parfait, right? With like yogurt and honey and berries, and like I like to put Cheerios in it.
Yep.
Instead of having that for like a solid snack, I'm holding Mallory and she's crying and we're trying to feed her, so it's a lot easier just to like go and grab three more Oreos.
Sure.
So I think that definitely plays a part, like my body just needing food and craving sugar because it needs, quick carbs, because I'm letting myself get over hungry, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
also leaning towards it because of just the convenience of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely do think that there's a lot of mental restriction going on. And I don't even know if it's so hard to even notice it because it still comes like so, it's like second nature.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I think that does you bring up a good point in that though, because I think it's really important. And one thing I've been trying to like tell myself is I try not to get caught up on like, you are eating so much sugar and it's affecting your baby. More so, I tend to the side of you are still really healing and recovering. And
Yeah.
if you eat sugar, it's fine kind of thing. But it is still really tricky because those other voices, like now there's a whole nother layer of it. Like what I eat now impacts my baby. So it's
Yeah.
like there's a whole nother layer of guilt that comes into play too. And I think kind of like what you're mentioning about the boat, it's avoiding that black and white of telling yourself like I am beautiful and I love the way I look and I'm going out on the book and like going out on the boat and screw it, like fuck it.
Yeah.
It's also acknowledging that yeah, that would be cool and I'm still having these feelings and like
Yeah.
that's our favorite thing, the gray area.
Yeah.
Acknowledging the suck and being real about it and
Yeah.
also recognizing that like by having these feelings I am taking away from being in the present moment with my family and my kids and everything, but it really is hard to always find the gray. It's a lot easier for me at least to go to the more restrictive side. Like that's
Yep.
still my tendency is towards restriction.
Yep. And I remember talking to my therapist about something totally unrelated, not diet, not exercise, but it was just a good realization for me when she expressed that your initial thoughts and reactions to things probably aren't ever going to change. But it's how you then pause and decide to react and move forward that makes a difference. And so I think a lot of times we feel shame about what our initial reactions are, but like that's just who we are, and that's most people are that way. But doing the work to figure out how it's best to move forward and what's in our best interest and all of that is what really makes the difference. And so I remember feeling so much better when, that kind of light bulb turned on for me, like when my when my husband does X, Y, or Z, I'm always going to get pissed. But I don't have to express that because, I know this, that, or the other about our relationship and I can move forward in this way. So I think you can apply that to so many things. But
Ooh.
the other thing that really resonated with me when you were talking about structure is I think that, at least in my experience, affects so many things for me as well. When I still would never change my path in moving from, being a pharmacist to now a business owner and working primarily from home. But I think what benefited me a lot was the structure of my day during that time. I was in a routine of, moving regularly. I was in a routine of meal prepping, not even when I stopped, counting calories and that, but just prepping myself for having good choices available because even though I don't have a baby in my arms, I'm always going to gravitate towards the convenience.
Totally.
Yeah, if I can grab something and go, or grab something and sit on my couch, let's be honest right now,
You're
I'm going to
still
do it.
going from the kitchen to the living room, lesbian.
Exactly. Um, and so I think that makes a big difference, but now I feel myself on both ends of the spectrum craving some structure so that I can be a little more prepared and have some routine in my life, but also I'm still like rebelling against the structure because I still feel like I'm in that space where I'm like, I'm finally out of this corporate world. I don't have to rush around all the time. I am going to slow down and take my time with things. And so I feel a little bit in limbo. And I think that contributes to my, not having as much motivation or not getting in that routine of moving regularly and making those nutritious decisions that I want to be making. So I would assume that maybe the level of structure in our lives affects other people as well. Um, so yeah, you thought that was a really important point to kind of highlight.
Yeah, I can totally see why you would feel like you're in limbo because it's like you have these two opposing ones. And part of me wonders if maybe it's because when we think about structure, our mind deviates to what it was in that season of our life.
Mm-hmm.
Like our mind sees it is regularly, Monday through Friday or Monday through Thursday going to the 5:30 a.m. class, having 3 meals and 2 snacks prepared. But I wonder if it would be helpful to think of it like, okay, what does structure look like for me right now? Or, if that is the goal for structure, what's one step I can take to get closer to it? Rather than feeling like, again, because I think it's almost like that all or nothing mindset just around structure, or that black and white thinking around structure, that it has to look this way in order for it to be structured. So that kind of makes me wonder, like, if you were to take one step towards that structure or any sort of structure, what do you feel like would be maybe a first step for you?
Ooh, good question. You're putting me on the spot.
You might need to ponder on that too.
I might need to ponder. I've always known that it would benefit me greatly to have a structure in terms of like when I do certain tasks in my business at home. And I feel like if I implemented that, that would kind of bleed into a lot of other things. Like then I would feel like I have the dedicated time to move or, to do whatever it is. I worked with Jade Boyd it was via the Empower Her group that I'm a part of. We had a meeting where Jade walked us through setting up your ideal week for entrepreneurs. And so it was, it could be different for everybody, but, answering emails from this time to this time in the morning. And then from this time to this time, I work on my personal development and, X, Y, and Z throughout the week. And I know that would be beneficial for me. It's just there's a mental roadblock for me of getting that set up because I'm still kind of rebelling against the structure for whatever reason.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I feel like, I don't know if we had this conversation on the podcast or if it was with someone else, but I remember talking to somebody about how it was probably students, because I meet with a lot of students who are just like, oh my God, their time management is just dreadful, right? Like mine was too. I get it. No, not throwing shade on students. I freaking love students. But where it's like, by having more structure, we think that limits our freedom, but it actually makes us feel more free when we do have that downtime, because it's like,
for sure.
Instead of thinking, okay, I'm free from 9 to 11, like, ugh, I didn't study all day. Like I guess I'm using student examples. Yes. I didn't study all day. I need to be studying. It can be like, nope, I did all the studying that I needed to during the day. So now 9 to 11, I get to choose what I want to do. I don't feel like I have to do one thing. I can work out. I can FaceTime with someone. I can read a book. I can work on this project, like whatever it might be. And finding that structure that, again, doesn't feel restrictive for you being where you're at. And I know for me, like going, obviously I've gotten back to work. My schedule is still kind of loosey-goosey.
Yeah.
Yes, so we are back right now. When this episode launches, I'll have, I think, two more weeks where I have an adjusted schedule, because we work from home. So I think most people know, but I work full time at the University of Iowa in student wellness. So I work one-on-one with students and like do group programs and workshops and whatnot. And in the summer, our supervisor lets us work from home 3 days per week. And then during the academic year, we work from home 1 day per week. So the week before classes start on April 14th is when we go back to the 4 days in the office, 1 day at home. So I have like 2 more weeks where I get to work from home 3 days per week. And it's really, really exciting because Tyler is on paternity leave right now. Aww. Paid paternity leave. Shout out to the company that he works for.
Say it again.
It's paid paternity leave. Like, incredible. It's not PTO. It's in its own separate bank. Oh my God. We need to have a whole episode on that. And so on the 3 days that I'm working from home, I get to see Mal because Tyler's home with her. So it's like, this has been such a good transition. I don't feel like I'm longing for her when I'm at work. And I have found that on the days that I go to work, the structure is so helpful, because it's like, these are the times of the day that I pump. I eat lunch at this time. I I move a lot more during my breaks. Like I'm getting up and I'm filling up my water bottle. I'm not on my phone as much. But applying that structure to the days that I work from home is like freaking pointless. Like
Yeah.
I do feel almost too restrictive, like what you were saying. Like I'm kind of rebelling against that. And I think I'm rebelling against it not because of like diet and body and food stuff, but more so I'm rebelling against how shitty my maternity leave was personally.
Sure.
But there's still that rebellion there. So yeah, I think it's a difficult thing to we can get into this gray area though where it's like we recognize that structure does have its pros, right? Instead of just thinking that it's all negative and all restrictive. But we just have to find what works for us. And I think in doing that, we have to release some of the both like societal norms for what structure looks like, but also the norms that we've created for ourselves in the past, because it's so easy to go back to those. And then
Mhm.
it's not going to feel good because again, it's like, I don't want that. I don't want that past, situation or that past me or that past structure. So it can be hard to find, the structure that works for you now, I feel like.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would say one other thing that has been coming up a lot for me is just noticing, and I think that this will need to be like a whole nother episode, but I wanted to mention it was just now knowing how I feel about my body and how I talk about my body, like I have a daughter.
Yes.
Yeah. And again, I think that we could probably have our own episode, whole episode dedicated to that.
Hmm.
Because there is a whole nother, again, a whole nother layer of like, you can't have those, like, you cannot think that anymore. Like all of that. And it's so interesting. Yesterday I met with a student, did a follow-up. I've been meeting with her for a couple years, and it was our first session back after maternity leave. And her mom has just just completely trashed her body and her relationship with food and movement. And it's gotten a lot better. But she recently visited her mom, and came back just like last week. So we were talking about it together, and her just explaining, it felt totally, she didn't tell me anything that she hasn't already in the couple of years that we've been working together, but it felt totally different knowing that I have a daughter now. And
Yeah.
so I think, again, it's just another layer of finding that almost that middle ground, that gray area of not guilt tripping myself, right? Like I don't need to feel
Hmm.
shame or judgment or guilt. And recognizing that like there are consequences of me saying negative things about my body out loud or picking it apart or,
Yep.
feeling certain way. So again, we could probably talk about that on a whole episode together,
I
but
feel like we should because it's interesting you bring that up because just yesterday, a friend of mine texted me and she said, I thought about your podcast today because, and she encountered a coworker who, and I'll save the full story for that episode, but she encountered a coworker who had a very complicated relationship with her body and her mother's perception of her body and all of that. And yeah, it would be perfect for an episode like that because it's kind of sad how much our families can affect our relationships with our bodies as well. So,
yeah.
and I definitely that's one thing that when I am down about, or when I'm thinking like, am I doing this just to avoid exercising and dieting and all that? That's one thing I remind myself about is like I'm setting a better example for my kids because I'm not focusing on that. At least I'm trying to be conscious of not verbalizing anything or, doing mirror checks or anything when they're
Yes.
around. So yeah, that should absolutely be one of our next episodes, I think.
Yeah. So that's a preview for what's to come,
Yeah.
people.
It's happening.
Yeah.
It's all unfolding in real time here.
Yes, it is. Seriously. Um, yeah. Well, I don't know. I think that it sounds like we're both feeling similarly about our bods, and I mean, I hope that it's helpful for people to hear about it. And again, just knowing that like you're going to have seasons where you don't feel good about yourself. Like it's not going to be all rainbows and butterflies. And that's why we do the work that we do in order to get to this like happy place with our body. But it's never going to be linear. It is absolutely, we're never not going to, like you mentioned what your therapist said. I love that point of your initial reaction probably will never change. You know, like I have yet to meet somebody who's like, I never have those thoughts anymore. Like,
Right.
did you have a lobotomy? Like how, of course not. So I think just reminding ourselves of drop the shame, drop any judgment, because it's only adding, you know, it's only making the situation worse, and it's kind of fighting against something that we don't really have that much control over, it feels like to me.
Right. Yep. I love that.
Yay. Well, Randy, anything else that you can think of that would be helpful that you want to add into this check-in?
I think we kind of covered what I've been feeling. I would love to hear, you know, if any listeners have any things that they've been dealing with recently, you know, let us know on Instagram. I think it's helpful to get perspective on what people who are listeners of our podcast are feeling as well. And I think, you know, summer is probably
Randy,
pretty popular for feeling this way because there's so many opportunities to do body checking and to be in scenarios where, you know, you're exposed to foods and things that, you know, might be triggering for you. And so I'm sure other people are feeling the same way we are. So we'd love to hear about it.
Yes, absolutely. Feel free to hit us up. Thanks for tuning in to the Give 'em the Bird podcast. If you're enjoying the podcast, head on over to Apple iTunes or Spotify and rate, review, and subscribe. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Give 'em the Bird podcast to stay up to date with all things GTB. We'll see you back here next week for another episode, but in the meantime, go give 'em the bird.